All right, it is 7:51, so let's get started. Um, I am delighted to welcome Lynda Williams, the physics chanteuse, to our Voices conference. Good morning, Lynda.
Good morning, Greg.
Lynda, I've been aware of Lynda since the late 90s when she was putting out CDs, including one that was devoted entirely to Maxwell's equations, which, you know, just as a sheer feat of science music fusion is just about unprecedented. So Lynda, like a lot of us, writes science songs, but she is much more of a performer than most of us. So she has a cabaret show. She's done a lot of work at conferences singing for professional scientists and getting paid for it. And she also does outreach with students, children, and activist groups. So she's had much more of a wide-ranging experience with science songs than most of us kind of classroom singers. And I think she's going to capture some of that breadth of experience in her talk today. So we'll ask you to hold your questions until the last 10 minutes or so of her presentation. Lynda, thanks a lot for being here. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you, Greg. This is an amazing conference that you're putting on. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
This is my first Zoom experience, so thank you for your patience. Yeah, so my experience is, first and foremost, I'm a performer, and I was not a good student in high school. I was into singing and dancing and performing, and I discovered my love of physics and science later in college. So I just want to do sort of an overview of how I got to do science entertainment, and yeah. Okay, so my original, can you see that okay? Is that coming through?
Yes, it is.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So originally I started producing works that had science themes, but mostly focused on cosmology and meaning of life and philosophy. And so one of the first large-scale productions I did back in the 80s was The Birth of Venus, where Venus comes back to modern America and interacts with technology. And it's a very abstract. I started off doing a lot of abstract work on science, cosmic themes. I did a show about bringing go-go dancers, alien dancers from outer space through time warp machines, and then I did performance art. I taught at the San Francisco Art Institute doing media production, and then I went back to school. I fell in love with physics, and I wanted to learn as much as I could to enhance my performance in my work. And I also experimented with interactive filmmaking, and Cyberstein was an interactive film about a neurosurgeon who transports her brain into cyberspace. That's back in the 90s when it was called cyberspace. Anyway, so that was a Wired interactive show. Then when I was getting my master's in physics at San Francisco State, I decided to do a cabaret show, and I came up with Cosmic Cabaret, and there I am in my little slinky outfit. And the idea was to try to create a full-blown cabaret show on a science theme, but for a general audience. And of course, the challenge of that is exposition. If you want to tell a joke or you want to explain some nuances about the science, you have to explain the science to the audience who may be scientifically illiterate, or not as well informed as you would like to be able to cover complex topics. So that's always the challenge I know we all face as science writers and science communicators, is how do you make the information accessible in a song format. So the songs I used to do before I was the physics chanteuse are like the Big Bang. So let's hear this guy. This is science exposition in 90 seconds. Can you hear that okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, cool, yay! There was nothing, and then Big Bang, Big Bang.
And then the cosmic soup expanded and cooled. The particle zoo was born in the goo. Protons, bosons, gravitons, leptons, energy, radiation. Super strings wiggling in space-time. Temperatures drop and the forces divide. Up, down, bottom, top, charmed and strange. Quarks stick together with a glue ball and chain to form protons and neutrons, hadrons and mesons, fermions and baryons, and on and on and on. Gravity attracts and galaxies form. Stars burn up and the elements are born. Hydrogen, helium, lithium, beryllium, boron, carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen, chlorine, neon, sodium, magnesium, aluminum, and silicon, and on and on and on. These are the things that everything is made of: chemical, mineral, vegetable, and animal. Big Bang, Big Bang, Big Bang, Big Bang, Big, 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 Big Bang.
So, can you hear me again? Hello? Hello?
Yes.
Okay.
I can hear you, Lynda.
All right, thank you. I'll stop asking if you can hear me. It's just...
Yeah,
Anyway,
I'm just muting myself so I don't interfere.
Oh, no, I want you to interfere. It's interactive universe after all. So I failed to mention that what I'm showing you are the video backdrops that I perform in front of. So what's so great about, what I think so great about the way that I do these shows is I produce these videos by appropriating media indiscriminately, I may add, invoking fair use doctrine. And so I put together the backdrops, and so it's really easy. I don't need a set. I just bring a DVD or I bring the videos and I perform in front of them. So you never see me in these videos because I'm performing in front of them. Does that make sense? Okay, I hope so. So here's another little song that I did. This was inspired by a book I read by Jack Sarfati on tachyons. And so this kind of, it's not really very scientific, but it's fun. It's an original song.
Quantum mechanical wormholes,
Taking the quantum jump.
my mini black and white hole extend through the universe,
Vibrating in and out of space-time.
taking the quantum jump
A jump through a black hole.
into another universe dimension. Jump, 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 quantum jump, 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 quantum jump, 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 quantum jump through a black hole.
And into another universe dimension. The quantum jump.
Jump, 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 take the quantum jump, 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 take the quantum jump.
Why? No. I'm a big fan of the 90-second song format. And so anyway, those are original songs. And then the physics chanteuse was created, invented. I attended my first conference at the American Physics Society, the winter meeting in Washington, D.C. And during the banquet, they had like a string quartet or something. And I just had this inspired epiphany that physicists need their own entertainment, customized cabaret. And I wrote down on the napkin the physics chanteuse, and she was born. And it was just good timing because it was during the dot-com boom and people had money. So I just started contacting conference organizers, and I just got gig after gig after gig, and a lot of press. You know, I had my little 5 minutes of fame or 15 minutes of fame, which unfortunately I was not able to turn into a full career. So I'm teaching, you know what they say. But I had an incredible experience being able to not only perform at conferences, but when I would get a gig, I would work with the scientists who were organizing the conference for almost up to a year, trying to figure out the best songs and ways to honor the not only the science, but the scientists. And so one of the greatest gigs I ever got was at Caltech for the Kip Fest, which was a celebration of Kip Thorne's 60th birthday. And it was like, I swear, it was shocking to me that the whole place didn't collapse under its own force of gravity, because every black hole and gravitational expert in the world was there. I got to meet John Wheeler, and I got to share the stage with Stephen Hawking. So that was thrilling. This is when I discovered the wonder of doing parodies. And so I actually have a whole CD collection called Parody Violation, which is a pun on parody violation. And this song, when I realized I was doing a show on Kip and I read Time Warp's, his book, I thought, oh, of course, a great parody would be Time Warp from your favorite show. And here it is, a little bit.
Science fact is stranger than fiction. When you work with Kip, he'll warp your logic
With matters exotic and strip away your cosmic censorship. Jumping into wormholes and Einstein-Rosen bridge. Let's do the time walk with Kip. So you get the idea. That was like, what was so great about that, doing karaoke, having the text up, is that you get the entire conference singing along, and that's really good fun. So that was a thrill. And another gig that I really loved was the American Academy of Forensic Sciences for their annual convention. I didn't know anything about forensic science, so I spent a year studying everything about forensic science to do this show. And of course, the first thing you do when you do a show is you look up prior art. So to see if you can do any parodies or you can do any renditions. And I discovered this amazing trio of performers called the County Medical Examiners. And these guys are medical examiners, and they're also a death metal band. So I found one of their songs, and their lyrics are absolutely incredible. They're all detailed process and procedure of what they do when they're examining corpses. So this is what their music sounds like. Okay, so that gives you a sense of what their music is. And then here's my version.
Corpse unidentified, rotting and liquefied, teeming with insect life. Call the forensic entomologist. They can estimate the body's BMI with the stadium and stages of the current state of the float-life population and the coleoptera infestation of the cadaveric colonization of
Float-life. Beetles, mites, lice.
All deposited,
egg-encrusted orifice, maggots, swimming wounds, sites creeping, rotten flesh.
the examiner's book and his perspicacious, searching through the mush
For spawning evidence.
Low-fly spiders, beetles, mice, and lice, maggots, larvae,
Pupa, hatch, and fly.
crawling, squirming, breeding, and burrowing.
Medical, criminal, entomology.
Low-fly spiders,
Beetles, mice, and lice. Maggots, larvae, pupa, hatch, and fly. Crawling, squirming, breeding, and burrowing. Medical, criminal, entomology. They got bugs on the brain. So I did ask permission to use their song, and I never heard back from them. So I always try to contact people when I'm borrowing. This is another song that I borrowed. This is from the great duo Hi Zaret and Lou Zinger, and hopefully everybody out there knows who they are. And if you don't, then you should go find their music. They produced music in the 60s, some of the best science music I've ever heard. They did the classic Why Does the Sun Shine that's been covered by They Might Be Giants, so you might know that. This is another one of their songs, What Does the Glass of a Greenhouse Do? And I produced this for a show for the American Geophysical Union, but I also used this in class. So this is I started producing songs for the shows that I could also use in my classes for teaching. And this is What Does the Glass of a Greenhouse Do?
What does the glass of a greenhouse do? It lets the short solar rays pass through. Objects in the house absorb these rays and re-radiate them as long rays.
What does the glass of a greenhouse do? It doesn't let the long heat waves pass through. Trapped by the glass, they bounce back and forth, re-radiated and reabsorbed. Stay, long heat waves. Warm up the house on cold, cold days. Stay, long heat waves. Warm up the house on cold, cold days. Okay, so the nice thing about karaoke is if you forget the lyrics when you're performing, you can just turn around and look at them. We have a couple more minutes till we start taking questions. So as Greg was talking about, I did do a CD of Maxwell's equations, and I did this to prepare for my oral exams for my graduate school. And what I did was I sampled Madonna's Ray of Light. I found every clip of music that didn't have her voice on it, and the whole album is done to that. And here's one example, the wave equation. It's kind of cheesy.
The wave equation.
Finally.
Start with Maxwell's equations in a vacuum and take the curl of Faraday's law. Now the trick is to use the vector ID for the curl of a curl. And then you'll see that everything simplifies. The Gauss's law tells us that L dot E is 0. And Ampere's law simplifies to the side. Put it all together and we derive wave equation for the heat field.
Our familiar friends.
Now take the curl of Ampere's law and follow the same path, and you get
An equation for V2. Now isn't this interesting? These are both wave equations that describe transverse plane waves traveling at the speed of c, the speed of light.
transverse plane waves traveling at the speed of light.
All right, so there's a whole album of that. And then quickly, I was hired, commissioned by Kentucky PBS channel, I guess that's KET, to do a segment for their GED television show, which is the high school equivalency exam. And this is a sing-along karaoke about waves, which isn't working. So you can see that online at my, all these, oh, here it is.
Sound wave, light wave, shock wave, radio wave, microwave, heat wave, brain wave.
Okay, you get the idea. And finally, I was commissioned by a science radio show to do one of my favorite songs, which is the Love On song. The Love On is the Boson of Love, and it's missing from the standard model. That's where we have more war and not enough peace. So, yeah.
Standard model of physics has 4 forces in it. The strong, the weak,
Gravity and the electromagnetic, but I have found a new force.
that rules from high above.
Let me propose to you
A unified theory.
of love. So anyway, I think I'm running out of time. I also produced a Newton's Third Law song, this is an original song, and I wrote this for Paul Hewitt. And the whole song is full of Paul Hewitt's imagery, and it's called Touch This, because that's the name of his book.
Universe likes to interact. You can't touch it without it touching you back.
The universe likes to interact. You can't touch it without it touching you back. So do unto others as you want them to do to you. You can't touch it without them touching you back. Newton was no fool. His third law is a golden rule.
To every force in that
Let's say it.
there is an equal and opposite reaction.
It's a golden rule.
To every force in that
Come on, everybody.
there is an equal and opposite reaction.
One more time.
To every force in action, there is an equal and opposite reaction.
Come on.
To every
Repetition.
force in action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. That's Kip Warp.
Anyway, and it goes on from there. Greg, is it time to do some Q&A or?
Yeah, I was just getting out my giant hook.
I swear I could go on for hours. I have so many songs. But anyway, thanks for your patience.
Yeah, no, thank you, Lynda. That's been a terrific overview. So everybody, please type your questions if you have. Larry Lesser says her songs have giant hooks too.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a great compliment.
You can always rely on Larry for a timely pun. Please type your comments in the chat, and I will dictate them to Lynda. Lynda, while we're waiting for those questions to come in, I was wondering if you wanted to talk about science activism a little bit, because I know you, so far you focused on the science content. Do you feel like music has been useful for you as a science activist as well?
Absolutely. So I typically, in my shows that I do, and let me show you, these are the shows that I've been doing over the last couple of years now that I'm a full-time physics faculty member. I use our facilities to produce shows. So if you can see on the left side, planetarium show on the search for life. So in the show, I talk about the environmental crisis that we're in and nuclear threats. So it's nice to be able to use songs to be able to address topics that are very heavy, like nuclear Armageddon. And also so I didn't share any of those songs because I don't have the voices recorded on a lot of those songs. So anyway, so I do use song for my activism. And I also have activism always in my teaching, and in my every single show I've ever done for Every Scientist has some kind of activism, if only Newton's third law and the love on, and that we need to take responsibility and for our actions as scientists, and also try to use science for good, like having a Hippocratic oath for doing good with our science.
Right. Great. I'm going to keep things snappy. Question from Walter Smith. In addition to your fabulous cabaret-style performances, do you use songs in your own classes, aside from the greenhouse glass one? Do your students know about your physics chanteuse persona?
You know what students do? As soon as they have you, they Google you and they find everything about you that's possible. So they know about it. I also share songs as appropriate, and I'll perform in class, but it's not like it's integrated into my curriculum. It's more, I'm teaching primarily calculus-based classes, so I don't really have a lot of songs that I could integrate into that, but I do absolutely sing in class and perform every day, so that I can just lighten the experience and make it fun. And I really think it's important for science to be a part of our culture, and that includes song, music, theater, movies, and not just as an instructional exposition of information.
Mm-hmm. I'm waiting for other questions. Of course, I could ask you questions all day.
We got 2 minutes.
Another one that comes to mind for me is, singing about science is fabulously fun. Most of us are amateurs. Occasionally, someone like you gets paid to sort of do up a real professional job of recording and performing. Do you have any thoughts about, do we need more grant funds set aside for science songs, or is there any way to make the finances work better so that people have resources to make really good science songs? Do we all need to learn about crowdfunding?
I actually think, it's interesting. I was invited to a AGU conference on communicating climate science, and it was all scientists. And I said, why aren't you inviting in the artists? Why aren't you inviting in people who are already communicating about these ideas? So I actually think, rather than training scientists to do the communicating, we need a whole new focus on science communicators who have like a degree in science communication and production of art. So we need to have, why isn't Selena Gomez singing about science? It needs to be integrated into our culture. I'm old now and semi-retired, but where's the new physics chanteuse? Where's the new science singers? And we're a bunch of teachers who sing in our classes and do little shows. I couldn't make a career out of it, but hopefully somebody else can, because it needs to be integrated into the larger culture so that we can have greater scientific literacy. That's what it's all about. For me, it's political and self-empowerment through scientific literacy, because if you don't understand science, you can't be a player in this high-tech world. So you got to be a high-tech girl or boy, or LGBTQ, gender fluid. Just saying.
And Lynda is quoting her song High Tech World, a Madonna parody. For those of you who didn't catch that slightly obscure reference, last question goes to Larry Lesser, or comes from Larry Lesser. What was it like to be on To Tell the Truth?
Surreal. Absolutely surreal, because, of course, if you've seen To Tell, that you can look at my video YouTube channel, and I have it up there. Will the real physics chanteuse please stand up? And I lost to a Playboy bunny. So I couldn't win. No one guessed me. It was the pinnacle of my pop career, and it was truly absurd. And yeah, that was not the weirdest experience I had, but definitely one of them for sure. Thanks for asking, Larry.
All right, Lynda. Well, this could go on all morning, but I'm afraid we need to make way for many other great presentations today.